All right. Cognitive principles in UX. And you all have an O'Reilly account through the Claremont College's library. So I just encourage you to sign into your O'Reilly account where you're accessing this thing and explore. Maybe that's not a during the semester thing. You're like, Dani, I don't need more information pumped into my brain. Thank you for playing though. But over the summer and things like that, where maybe you might have a little bit of bandwidth, know that you have an O'Reilly Media account. And that account, I believe, is accessible to you even as an alum. I got to call out Mark for saying that good patterns based on cognitive principles by themselves do not necessarily produce an experience that doesn't suck. Totally, right? Like we're learning all of these best practices and we're learning all of these patterns. That doesn't necessarily mean if you do them, your designs will be successful. Everything is context dependent. And I think a lot of you are figuring that out. So kudos to Mark for that comment. I also loved what was happening. A few of you were mentioning prospective memory. Teresa, Franklin, a few of you mentioned prospective memory and the idea of technology helping us remember what we need to do. And I just love that. I love that thread because I think this is a case where AI powered tools are actually going to be a very interesting space. We can make predictions better. And that means that all of the algos out there are getting better and better and better exponentially at predicting what you're gonna do next, what you're gonna want next, what you're gonna buy next. So when I'm thinking about prospective memory, like some of you brought up, it's like, what do I need to remember to do in the future? I wonder if some of these algorithms are actually going to be serving us up like, oh, you started down this path, and now I think you're gonna want to do this. Liked that thought. Um, Serena, you were talking about AI and generative AI in terms of like website design. Love that line of thinking. Malia kind of like chimed in with you. Um, we have all these patterns. We have an entire internet of, websites. So if we just take the average and AI generates websites for us based on these best practices, who needs designers, right? Because we already know what's good. Okay, I spoilered my point of view because I started with Mark's comment, but it is a really interesting thing to be thinking about how some of these design tools, like Figma, are going to start being able to produce something based on a text prompt. So if I say I want an e-commerce mobile app that can do X, Y, and Z, and Figma produces prototypes for you, that's a very different job for a designer than creating something like that from scratch. And I think new challenges arise in that future. So I love that a couple of you are thinking about that because it is a big like great. And yeah, um Jack, Rosie, Smirity, you all talk about like the good design is invisible kind of theme from the chapter. Definitely good call out there. Feelings about the future of UX as some of these AI tools become more and more prevalent. I'm really optimistic and excited. I am scared and full of uncertainty. Give me one of these. Oh, we have some optimists. Oh, we have some very pragmatic folks as well. Yeah. Yay. Okay. Totally. I know. Some days I am so this. Like I'm right there with Mark. You have a thought, Mark? Okay. So, first things first. Let's go back to this. This was in your book. This was also in the slides last time and the time before. But I just want to anchor you to the interaction process. We sense a thing, a signifier, an icon, a button, and we perceive whatever potential it has. That kind of goes along with our expectations. If I see a rectangle and it's a different color than everything else, I might expect it to be a button. Then I may click on that rectangle, expecting it to take me somewhere or cause some new thing. I'm going to get feedback around whether the thing happened the way I expected it to. And then I'm going to learn based on that outcome. And this is sort of like the human technology interaction process. And what I'm going to talk about first related to Gestalt principles is the sensing and perceiving. So there are, as information enters our eyes in this case, but also our ears and our other senses, as information enters our brain, the way it is perceived, the way it is initially processed, has some, well, we'll call them shortcuts. We'll call them fun little rules and principles, right? So your brain's trying to help you see the world, process the world, and it does some things under the hood before you can even really consciously process the information to help you get to the outcome it thinks you're going to arrive to. What do I mean by that? Well, there are a bunch of Gestalt principles. These are visual processing principles when it comes to the information that enters our eyes and therefore our brains and how we perceive it. And we're going to go through a few of them. I like this quote. The whole is something else than the sum of its parts. I think that's very Gestalt principle, which is rationally, some of these things are just a series of lines or just a box. But to our perceiving brains that are trying to help us out, they become something with more information attached to whatever is coming in. So we have closure, proximity, common fate, continuity, common region, and similarity. These are the 6 that I think are the most common in UX and applicable to digital experiences. But there are so many more than this. There's figure ground and a whole bunch of other Gestalt principles that can be applied to UX. So I'm going to go through these, but know that there are even more to dive into, and I'll give you some resources for exploring that. And for the first one, I'm going to need a volunteer. Volunteer. Ian, gosh, you're always the sacrificial first. Yeah,
I just
go
got
Ian.
back from making my coffee. I don't know what's happening, but I'll go.
All right, so you're gonna be my volunteer, and this is an easy one, so don't overthink it. Okay, what is this shape?
Circle,
Yep. What is this shape?
star.
Excellent. 10,000 points for Ian. He officially wins the day. A circle and a star. How many folks are seeing a circle and a star? Yes, right? Bravo, brains. Which is funny because really, is there a circle here? No. There's a bunch of little lines here. Is there an actual star here? No. There's just some lines here, right? And they're just suggesting a star and suggesting a circle. And this is the principle of closure. Your brain sees enough cues to go, yeah, circle. Got it. I know this one. And it serves you up, it's a circle, before you even have a chance to touch that information. Oop, star. Yep, I know this one. You're welcome, Dani. Here it is. You see a star. But really, there's no circle and there's no star here. This is a panda. Yep, we all see a panda. We don't see a bunch of black blobs. We see a panda. And this is our brains taking in the information and giving us a nice, efficient little shortcut to store in our memory. If instead of a panda, this like processing that we do where we kind of close the gap here, if we processed each of these black blobs, it'd be really hard to remember this shape. It'd be really hard to remember what's going on here, how many blobs there are, etc. Instead, our brain helps us with this mental shortcut. It's a panda. This one, not everybody gets this one, but I do. When I go to the store and I think of Gestalt principles, because that's my life, and I go to the alternative milk section and I see ripple, I read nipple because we are in the milk section and I am psychologically primed to read nipple. If you think that's bizarre, they did that on purpose, I promise you. And if you Google it, lots and lots of people are like me. It's because my brain is sort of closing. I mean, they already have this closure principle, right? Like they don't have an outline around their letters, but they're sort of allowing you to read nipple. And to Franklin's point, yeah, like apple, totally. Have you ever just been going through, I don't know, driving? This happens to me a lot. And then I'll read a sign. And okay, I was going up skiing and there was a street sign. It said bobsled drive. And I read Bob's Bled Drive. Bob's Bled Drive. And I was like, oh, that's kind of, I wonder who Bob was, you know? And then it's like, oh, no, it says bobsled. I slow down, I'm reading it, right? That's my brain just trying to help me out by not really taking in all the information and just giving me a shortcut. Okay, in UX, you see closure all the time, not just in logos, but in things like this. This is a box. It's broken by the label of the box, but you still see it as a rectangle. We can do this because we know your brains will handle the fact that this is a rectangle. And then we can add a label that's really clearly associated with that rectangle as a way to leverage this. So this is closure. Okay, that was a warm-up. The next one is proximity, and it has crowns because proximity is king, queen of Gestalt principles when it comes to UX. And you'll see what I mean as we move through. So here are some circles, and we naturally will view these objects as related and these objects as related. And like, sure, they're both blue circles, so they probably have some relation to each other. But this group of 8 and this group of 12 are more related than their counterparts. Why? Because they're grouped together. Even more so, you come over here, we have changing colors. So these are different than these families of things. But these two are more similar than these two. Why? Because they're closer together. In fact, these two, which have no business being related to each other. One's a hex and one's a circle, right? But these two are more related than these two, who are obviously brother circles. It's just because they're close together. And that's why I say proximity is king or queen or ruling empire. Empire of Gestalt principles. If things are close together, our brain perceives them as related. And the closer they are together, the more related they are, despite whatever else is going on. This is really important when we're talking about UX and UI. So over here, you could see a website. Perhaps this is text, perhaps these are images, doesn't really matter. But it's unclear, or it's less clear, which relationships are happening to which thing until you have space between them. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, these are one unit now. We know that. So space really, really matters. And the lack of space really, really matters. Example, you'll see a million signs out there in the world. And I bet a third of you read Wash Senior Vacuum Citizens, because the spacing's a bit wrong here. And you'll see these signs like this all over the place where you like read things in a different order. This happens on websites, etc. Another really common place for this to happen is on forms. My God, who has filled out a form, either like physically filled one out or online, and it's like, wait, which line is my name? Which line is my birthday? Which line? Yeah. Because like the labels are kind of in between land, and it starts off okay, but then as you keep going, it's like, wait, is this for C or D? Right? So when forms are all smashed together and the labels are really close to the text input field, you can get a lot of errors from your users because this principle of proximity is at play and it's conflicting with your goals. So proximity is a big one. Really, really important. Any questions on closure or proximity? If at any time during this lecture you come up with an example, you've seen an example recently, drop it in the chat. I'd be really curious your examples. Okay, the next one is a little bit less intuitive. It's called common fate. Common fate is things that move together are related or the same. Things that move together. So, for example, kittens. We perceive things that move together as more related than things that don't move together. And I can tell that I was so excited about the kittens that I covered up some other stuff. So let me just go back to this. Wow, I was so excited. They're so cute though. Okay, so how this applies in UX UI land is we perceive movement when two screens are different. So like, okay, you don't realize your brain is doing this, but when I flash two things in front of you, your brain perceives movement. And if I had taken an object and moved it, flashed one image and then the other image back and forth, it's like those flip books or whatever with the little cartoon. Yeah. And it's like, oh, he's running when I flip it. Yeah. Your brain helps fill in the gaps when it comes to movement. And one of the ways this happens is things like drop down menus. So if you click a drop-down menu, you perceive it as popping down, even though it just appeared. Sometimes they actually animate and drop down, but you actually perceive this motion. And then when you hover over something and it comes out to the side, you perceive it as moving over to the side. And if you've ever found a menu that does this, where you hover on the next thing and it pops to the other side, you won't really be able to articulate why, but the whole experience is going to start to feel really clunky and maybe even a little bit not so trustworthy because things aren't moving in the pattern you expect them to. So we want things to cascade and we want things to follow a natural movement pattern, whether it's animations or sort of like these perceived animations that our brain does. Also, if you're implying direction, so I've got MJ here in Beat It, yeah, because that's where I'm at today. But you'll see that like the folks on this side, they're all on the same team. And the folks on this side are all on the same team because there's this implied movement in where their shoulders are facing and where their faces are facing. And we actually perceive them as different groups, even though this is like one big group of people. Yeah. Okay, so this is common fate. Things that move together or imply movement together are perceived as the same or related. Kittens. Okay, I'm gonna need another volunteer. Jack, thank you.
No problem. What am I doing?
So here we are, continuity. I want you to tell me for this teal section, if I told you there were two lines, what are the two lines doing?
Intersecting each other, kind of making an X, like wavy a little
Yeah,
bit.
so you perceive like this one's a line and this one's a line.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Thank you. You win 10,000 brain points today. You are a human with a brain. We
Awesome.
appreciate it. But what if I first gave everyone the description of this as two caterpillars that were bumping tummies? You wouldn't have perceived that. That's not how your brain's going to naturally perceive these unless we give you some kind of cue like color. So to Jack's point, here, everyone's going to see this is a group. And why do we think this is a group? Because continuity. And this is a group. And these two lines are intersecting or overlapping. Similarly, these things are really related. These things are pretty related. These things are not related.
I have a question.
Yes.
Doesn't that also relates to proximity in a way? Because you're looking at how close the other object is to the one that was from before for your brain to like understand that as continuity.
Yes. And thank you for bringing that up because a lot of these Gestalt principles overlap like that. So I actually think this also overlaps with the common fate principle because things in a line kind of imply movement or that they could move together. And maybe that's why our brains do this because things that exist in the world, if they're all lined up, they behave the same or they're one thing or we just group them together somehow. This is the same thing. So once upon a time, someone I know had a yard that was very natural looking, and lots of plants that were intentionally planted in a wild pattern. Okay, because that's my vibe. I want a forest. I don't want a curated garden. But folks who see my yard think it looks very unintentional and like things that just kind of like emerged and then I let them grow instead of planting them. Because we tend to plant things in rows. Like here's a row of this and then like a hedge and these are all the same bush and like all of that stuff. And people really like that because it's like this continuity principle. Everything looks organized, things look related and intentional. So it's hard for some people to imagine that I intentionally planted things all over the place with no thought to like whether tall things and small things and whatever, wherever they landed, that's where they went. So, yes, that's definitely like a proximity thing as well as a continuity thing. So here's an example of if we want things to be perceived as more related, we're going to leverage proximity and we're going to leverage continuity. So put all these kind of widgets in a line, put all these widgets in a line, and then, you know, make certain things close together. And there you go. You're really leveraging both of those principles. Similar thing for those of you who have done any kind of coding or scripting. So we have these continuity principles. Whether this is just text or in coding, we are leveraging continuity to know this and this are related, just like this and this whole section are related. So yeah, this is just sort of that principle of continuity. They may not be spaced, like this is far away proximally. This is very far away from this, but they're related because of continuity. Great. Common region. So this is a fun one you'll see all the time now. Draw a box around something, put a very light gray, barely there background around something, and behold, you have relationships. Now these 4 are a thing, and it's different from these 4. Now these 6 are a thing, and they're different from these 6, even though they're all the same distance from each other. So you'll see this in UIs all the time. If we want to help someone relate to things and we can't do it through proximity, we might draw a box around it to help them out. If I draw it this way, now these 2 things are related. So this is a really good one to be aware of if you're struggling. This can relate to product design and things like that, but think about this too for things like PowerPoint presentations, right? So if you draw a box around something, or if there's a box kind of behind something, it's going to look more related. Tables are a great example where we have relationships and they go in different directions, and proximity can't always get us all the information we need to convey to the human. So here we have the title of the song. That's how these are all related. They're all a title. But then I draw a box around this to help you realize that these are all related. So this is really, really common. Thank you. That was not my playlist. Great. Bento box. I know, Serena. I think about that all the time. Okay, last one, similarity. Same color, same shape. This one's pretty intuitive. Make them look the same and we will naturally relate them, regardless of proximity, continuity, movement, all of these other things we've described. So when you need to make relationships to things that are all over the place, make them the same color, make them the same shape, make them the same size. Help people out. And where does this often apply? Buttons. Every button's a rectangle. And you know that buttons are important when they're like, oh, in this website, their primary buttons are all green. So now when you see a green rectangle, you know that this is an object that does a thing. Similarity can get you some of the way, but just like I was saying, there's like a hierarchy, and proximity is sort of empire of all Gestalt principles when it comes to UI. We may be able to see that, you know, the black triangles are similar things, but when things become more random, the relationship starts to break down. So these two things are pretty related to this thing, but not super related. In fact, these four objects may be more related than these ones. So you'll start to see that like natural hierarchy that your brain is doing. Just like similarity can help us, it can also hurt us. And more often in UX, we want things to be visually appealing, so we make a lot of things similar and it ends up harming us. So here we have Synchrony, and they have made all of their buttons green. And especially because they put submit up here, you're just as likely to click add attachment once you finish your message as you are to click submit inquiry. Because we're humans and we take shortcuts mentally, and this is kind of where we expect the submit button to be. And they're all green buttons, so it's not conveying enough difference. If this were a gray button, then maybe we wouldn't mistake it for the submit button as much. And don't even get me started on why cancel is here in green and all of that. No, thank you. So similarity can hurt us. That is sort of the takeaway. For example, make things too similar and suddenly our brains are doing our mental shortcuts that are so helpful, but in a direction we don't want them to. The Google icons, when this set of icons came out, were a prime example of this. Yes, great. Questions or comments before we do a little activity on this? You're all feeling the Google icon pain, and Gauri has a great example of like continuity and perceived movement and closure with the spinning loading indicator. It's not ever really a circle, but it implies circle to you. Okay, so what am I gonna have you do? Each team is going to get a Gestalt principle, and you're going to scour the internet. Amazon's a great place to start. You're gonna scour the internet however you'd like and find as many examples of your principle as you can. And, you know, maybe it's good if I provide you like a blank Miro board just to drop images. So just have someone designated to screenshot things and then just find as many of your Gestalt principle as you can. Share. Let me just make sure permissions are good. Yes. Okay, so in the chat, here's a Miro board you can use if you want to do it that way. And for each team, this is your assigned Gestalt principle. I think common fate's going to be the hardest one, but I feel confident in you because you do have Google search. So you'll be able to find things. So we'll see who can come up with the most, and then we'll see who can come up with like the most entertaining one. Okay, so we've been talking about the sensing and perceiving level of the interaction process, but now we're going to get into a little bit more of the expectations and related behaviors, decision making, and information sort of processing beyond just these visual inputs. So I'm excited to dive into this with you. And we can't really talk about cognitive biases and other things without talking about the dual process model of cognition. How many of you have heard of the dual process model of cognition? System 1, System 2, thinking fast and slow? Awesome. So some of you have taken a cognition course, some of you have not. So for some of you, it will be a little bit of a review, but there are, in cognitive psychology, there once was a duo, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, they did a set of cognitive experiments that sort of laid the foundation for all of behavioral economics. No big deal. They won a Nobel Prize about it. So Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, what they discovered and what they documented is that the human brain processes information in a way that isn't always rational. And what they also discovered is that there are certain contexts or certain stimuli that can produce really systematic errors in reasoning or thinking. And from this, they popularized the dual process model of cognition, which is the idea that we have two systems, if you will. System one is fast, and it's based on people call it intuition, gut feelings, emotional reactions. It's what keeps us alive. It's what is at play if I were to like throw something at you and you catch it before you can even really consciously think that something's being tossed your way. System one is built for our quick responses to the world. But system one also often gets us into trouble because it processes a bunch of information non-consciously and results in decision making or perceptions of the world that aren't necessarily founded in rationality. And that's where system two comes in. System two is your slower cognition. It is your thinking, reasoning, conscious processing. It's about decision making and goal oriented behavior. And it is a finite resource. So everything that you're processing in that sort of system two way takes effort and energy. So it's slow, it's conscious, it has limited capacity. So many of the cognitive biases that we will call out are a product of our system one trying to help us out. Once again, the brain is trying to be efficient. It's trying to process things in larger chunks for more effective storage and more effective, faster decision making. So we have all these mental shortcuts because at some point, these kinds of things were very advantageous, and sometimes they still are, right? Slam on your brakes so you don't hit the pedestrian before you even really consciously think about it. You're slamming on your brakes. That's system one. So, but when it comes to decision making and things, sometimes system one can be leveraged a little bit against our will into things like making a purchase decision and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about all of this. And the first one we're going to talk about, Dan Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Anyone read this before? It's a little dry, but it's a great audio book, like while you're cleaning and stuff. But it applies all of these system one and system two things to society, and really good kind of fun read for people who want this deeper dive into our mental shortcuts and systematic biases. And just for funsies, as I was creating these slides, I made some edits. And isn't that much nicer? You know, proximity. It's really just, really just helpful. Okay, cognitive biases. So we're going to go through all of these and give some examples along the way. The first one is the anchoring effect, and I will need 2 volunteers for the anchoring effect. Who's not eating? Smearty? And I'm not going to pick Ian again. He already did that for you. I will choose Rosie. Okay, thanks for being my volunteers. So I'm going to send one of you to a breakout room while I ask the other one a question. And then we'll bring back the person and ask them the question. That's that. Okay. So I'm going to send Rosie to the breakout room. Let me just send the room. Okay, I think it's easiest. I'm going to open breakout rooms. Don't go into yours unless your name is Rosie. Bye, Rosie. We'll bring you back in like 2 minutes. Okay, so while Rosie's gone, I'm going to ask Smearty a question. Let's see here. I just want to make sure I get it right. Okay, so I'm going to give you some money to complete a task for me. So the task is you're going to read an extra chapter in the book than everybody else before next class. So how much is the minimum amount of money you would accept to do that task? The minimum amount where you would even consider reading an extra chapter before next week's class.
$4.
$4. Wow. Don't even mind reading. So if I gave you more than $4, you'd start to consider, yeah, I can read that extra chapter before class.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm not going to take you up on that, but just everyone remember $4 from Smirty. Okay, now I'm going to bring back Rosie. Great. Rosie, welcome back. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you some money to complete a task, but the maximum I can pay you legally without tax issues is $800. Okay, so the task is I want you to read another chapter before class next time. So that's the task. And I'm going to pay you to do that. But what's the minimum amount of money it would take for you to consider reading another chapter before next class?
The maximum you can give me $800.
Well, so the minimum, yeah, I want to know the minimum where you would even start to
Okay.
consider
$100.
$100.
Yeah.
Like if I said I'd give you $100, you'd read another chapter before class next
Yeah.
time. Great. Okay, so the question I asked Mirati was the same question, but I didn't tell her about the $800 limit. I didn't tell her I can only pay you $800 or else I'm going to start to get into we have to pay taxes on it. And the reason why I'm telling you about this is because the anchoring effect is providing some kind of information that anchors the person to a given, in this case, dollar amount. And the idea is that we make decisions starting from that anchor place and moving from it. So in Smirati's situation, it was like maybe she's starting from $0 or $1. Danny's going to give me $1. So how many more dollars would it take before I'd actually read the chapter? Smirati's answer was $4. Rosie is laughing. And Rosie's answer was 100. Now, these two individuals may have completely different lives, motivations for reading more material, tolerances in their schedule for extra work, right? This is not a perfect comparison. But with Rosie saying $100, imagine now like she was anchored to that $800 mark and she moved down from $800. And this is the anchoring effect. If you give someone an amount, then they'll move from that amount to make their decision. And this is important in so many domains. Negotiation, for example. If you provide, like if a recruiter asks you, how much money are you expecting to make? Or like, what salary are you hoping for? And you say at least $50,000 a year. If their budget was $100,000 for that position, they might now offer you only like 60 or 75. Whereas if you said, I'm looking for 120, and then they're like, well, we can't, our max is 100,000. Now you're going to make 30,000 more than if you had supplied that lower number. So yeah, this is the anchoring effect. And it's used all the time in really sneaky ways sometimes. Anything with a default value. So if you go to buy a gift card on Amazon, it'll automatically select $50. Like this is what it plugs in for you. And then you have to go in and say, no, I want a different amount. And even here, if you wanted to give your friend a $20 Amazon gift card for their birthday, you would have to go out of your way to enter $20 here, right? Because it's giving you these pre-selected items as if gift cards only come in $25 increments. So when you arrive on this site, because $50 is already pre-selected, you might just go with that. Like, actually, yeah, I guess $20 wasn't enough. Or maybe you'll even just go with 25 because it's a button here. So they're anchoring you. They're anchoring you to these values. So this may seem like no big deal, but let's get a level deeper and perhaps a little bit spookier. So through the anchoring effect, there's a common practice called the decoy effect. The decoy effect. So let's imagine we're a company and we created these two computers, two desktop computers. One has less processing power, one has more processing power. One has less storage, the other one has more storage. Okay, and there's a $200 difference between these two. If we put these on our site, people may do the comparisons and think, well, $200 more. Do I really need all of the bells and whistles? Maybe I'll just go with this option. But most companies know about the decoy effect. So you'll actually see this. They will create a third product that is much more expensive than the middle product to anchor you to something higher. And then you'll see that, like, okay, well, I don't need that, but a lot of this is really similar. And when you compare these two options, the middle one starts to look like a really good deal compared to this third option. I once worked at a hardware company that created a third product like this that was like 40% more expensive and only had one additional silly feature. In the factory, they only made like 10,000 of those because they didn't actually expect to sell them. Each physical retail store only got a couple because they didn't expect to sell them. The whole point was the decoy effect. The whole point was to anchor you to you could spend $1,500 and therefore now the middle option looks like a really good deal. Whoa. So this happens everywhere. And the anchoring effect also happens whenever something is pre-selected for you. So there was a study around organ donation. If the box is pre-checked and you have to uncheck it, I don't want to be an organ donor on my driver's license. If it's pre-checked, they'll get so many more organ donors because people will have to take away the check mark instead of adding the check mark. So they're anchored to the idea of I'm an organ donor now. Same kind of principle. Trippy, huh? Right? So this is the anchoring effect and the decoy effect. Anchoring happens everywhere. You won't be able to unsee it now. And all the middle standard plans, you'll see like, oh, we're recommending this one. And it's like, weird. Why isn't the company like recommending the best one, like the $300 one or something? And it's because that one is anchoring you. Like they have no intention of you buying that one. It's just to make $15 a month look a whole lot better than $300.
I think the best daily example of that is tips.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Tell me more about that. But I see what you're going.
Not paid 15% since they gave you the three option of 15%, 18%, and 21%. I'm like, I feel like I'm getting scammed here.
Yeah. Does everyone know what Serena's talking about? So when you like check out and on the interface, it's like leave a tip and it has those buttons. Like you might have only given them $5 before, and maybe that was only like 12% of your bill. But now you have these pre-selected options, 15, 18, 21. And then it's like, well, I want to be a good tipper. And I don't want to sit there and type in a custom tip amount. I just want to hit one of the buttons. So yeah, tips, that's a great example. Another very, very common example is sales and sale prices. So many companies, you go online, all of their stuff is always on sale, right? And so you'll see the like $60 and it's crossed out and it's like, it's only $35 right now. And then if you look at the price history, it's never been $60. And that's because they're just anchoring you to $60 to make you feel like this is a $60 jacket. Yes, the anchoring effect. So great. Okay, the next one is social proof. So I want you to get out your annotate stamp. So you'll go to your toolbar, find the little annotate icon, select a stamp, and you're going to vote on one or the other thing by just stamping on the slide. Okay, so you were doing the thing, you're at school, your backpack broke, and you need a new one now. So you want this one, and on Amazon, here are two vendors. Seems like the same backpack. Let's even say this one will come one day sooner. Which one will you buy? Some folks are saying the left one, or the right one, rather. A couple folks will take the one day sooner. Yeah, so you do this all the time on, especially on sites like Amazon where there are multiple vendors. But it's like 5-star reviews, folks. This one only has, 4.5, but 27,000 reviews versus 6 people. It's like way more reputable, right? Like I'm way more likely to have a good experience with this backpack. And this is the concept of social proof. Displaying how many other people, how many reviews there are, tagging something as like most popular, that's social proof. And it builds trustworthiness, regardless of whether it's true or rational. And we're willing to take social proof over a lot of other things. Have you ever done the thing where like an influencer is trying to sell you a product and maybe you were gonna buy a slightly different one, but now that the influencer is telling you about this brand, it's like, I'll just go ahead and get that one. I trust them, right? Hannah?
Yeah, I was gonna just explain how this example reminds me of like restaurants on Yelp or places you go onto Yelp. They're going to be restaurants that sell very similar foods or like whatever their advertising is very similar. But one restaurant will have like 5-star reviews and only 20 people go. Maybe one person will say like, it was all right, versus another restaurant that have like 10,000 views and I guess the reviews are more skewed. There's more like I'm using stats language now. It's more variance. Like there's more spread of how people would review the restaurant, so it's more reliable compared to only like a few people from who are selling the same food per se.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is our tendency, which is a good tendency, generally speaking, to go with crowds. If a mob is running down the street, you don't wonder what they're running from. You just start running in the same direction, right? This is a survival ingrained tendency to go with the herd. So, to your point, like seeing the larger that mob is, if it's two people running down the street, you're not going to join them. If there's 40 people running down the street, you don't care what they're running from, but you're out of there, right? Other elements related to social proof are just likes. So have you ever found like a really funny video, but only 6 people have liked it? So like you're not gonna like it as well. I don't know. There are things like, or, oh, 2 million people liked this video of this kitten, so me too now, right? It kind of influences your behavior, even when you hope that it wouldn't. Number of likes, number of shares, and then different systems will leverage this all the time. Customers also viewed, customers also bought, and they'll give you bundling suggestions. A lot of the times, these aren't even based on human data. These are just like the system found other black bag type things and was like, people also like this. Maybe you want this one too. And that's why sometimes they seem really strange because the system's using a bunch of rules oftentimes to generate those. Sometimes it's based on data, like Amazon has the data. A lot of the times it's based on that, but other times it's not, and you can't ever really be sure. Okay, so that's social proof, really strong one. The next one is loss aversion. The idea with loss aversion is that losses loom larger than gains. Losses loom larger than gains. And I think, yeah, for this one, we're gonna do it. I'm going to see if I can quickly redo the breakout rooms because yes, I can. I'm going to put you in 2 breakout rooms and I'm going to join each one and tell you the instructions and we'll come back and compare. So go ahead and join the rooms.
You know, I left without saying anything because I thought people saw the message, but maybe I should have said something.
That's okay. You're welcome to rejoin and corral them back here.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yay. Welcome back. The other room is still calculating their average, so we'll just give them a moment. Franklin, what was the number?
The average was 75.
Great. I'll just give the other team a little ping that they. Okay. So I know many of you know what I'm doing here, but I think it's a fun activity anyway, especially if it doesn't work out for some reason. So one team, Franklin's team, got the question on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being the best day of your life. If you found $500 on the street and you got to keep it, what's your score? Scale of 1 to 100. Emma's team got the question on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being the worst day of your life. How would you feel if you accidentally dropped $500 on the street and lost it forever? So Franklin gave me their score was 75 was the average. Emma, what was your average?
It's 62.
62. So this actually didn't work out. That's interesting. The concept is that losses feel worse than equivalent gains. But apparently, y'all are very okay with what happens. I lost $500. And you all feel really happy when you gain $500. So typically what we would expect if this were like a more controlled experiment, and maybe it's the amount of $500, but typically what we would expect is finding $500, let's just say that felt like 25 happiness points, but losing $500 feels like 50 sadness points. It feels twice as bad to lose the same amount as it does to feel happy gaining that amount. So that's what should have happened, I guess, but that's not what happened here. Maybe you're anchored to your student loans, and that's why this didn't work out for us. Or maybe one or two students, yeah, we didn't take into account outliers, right? So that's another thing that we would want to figure out too. But loss aversion is that it feels really awful to lose stuff. And this is so ingrained in us that it affects almost every decision we make. One way this can be leveraged is like anything around saving money feels good, but stop losing money feels more extreme. It's more motivating, even if it's the same amount of money. So there are so many products and services that are built on our loss aversion. I've seen all those garbage ads during your mobile gaming sessions that are like, hey, you could be paying for subscriptions you don't even know about, right? You could have like 5 Netflix accounts and you don't even know. Just pay us $20 and we will find all those subscriptions for you and you will stop losing money today. Okay, so that's one extreme example, but every insurance that society endorses is playing to our loss aversion. I'll pay you a little bit of money every single month so that I never suddenly have to pay you $10,000. Even if over my lifetime, I would have saved money if I just didn't have insurance. That is not me endorsing you not having insurance. I'm just saying that humans are built on this principle. So, sorry, I just saw debt isn't real and I lost it. Yes. So, losses loom larger than gains. We don't like to lose things. And that goes for things more than just money, like progress. Are you sure? All your investment will be lost, all that time. You're going to lose all your progress, right? So loss aversion is a very powerful thing that can be leveraged in a lot of situations. Adjacent to loss aversion, kind of building on it, is the foot in the door technique. Hey, pay us $0 today, and then after your free week subscription, you'll pay us X amount every month. Foot in the door. We're gonna give you the thing, and then you're gonna have to lose the service, lose the product. And we're just banking on not necessarily that you'll forget, although people do that, and that's helpful for them to make money, but it's actually that you'll now have that app, and it's hard for you to lose it once you have it. So foot in the door technique. Sign up for an account. Now that you have it, you don't really want it to go away, then we might threaten you that we're closing your account. But what if you wanted to use that service in the future? Similar to loss aversion and foot in the door is the sunk cost fallacy. This is so real in so many areas of life. So whether it's you've spent a lot of time using a particular builder for your UX portfolio. Let's say you were using Adobe portfolio. Ian, I never mean this as a personal attack, but you laughed last time too. So let's just say you're using like Adobe portfolio and you've spent hours building your portfolio, but then you kind of realize like, I'd be so much better off building my portfolio in Wix, and I want to make the switch. but now I'm going to have to start over. And I've sunk all this time into the other tool. I did this a little bit too with audiobooks. When Spotify released audiobooks, as an avid audiobook listener, I've had Audible for like, I don't know, since Audible. Like I've had Audible for so long. And when Spotify released audiobooks and most of the books I wanted were available with my Spotify premium account, rationally, I should have canceled my Audible subscription. But I've always had Audible. I don't know, like, and I have a few credits in there probably. I've always had it, right? So this like sunk cost principle gets us in worlds of trouble in all areas of life, which is related to our loss aversion. Okay, a couple more. So the mere exposure effect. The more we see something, the more we like it, the more trustworthy it is. That's things like, you know, the hamburger menu, sure. You see it a lot, then you end up liking it because you see it a lot. But have you ever noticed that there are advertisements for things that it's like, who doesn't know what an Oreo is? Does Oreo really need to be advertising? Anyone not heard of Netflix? This little company is called Netflix. Haven't heard of it? Why are they advertising? Especially if they don't have a promo. Especially if it's not like, ooh, sign up now and get blah, blah, blah. Like the Super Bowl ads. It's just Pepsi. And it's like, okay, well, we knew about Pepsi, but you spent millions of dollars on that ad. Why? Part of the reason is the mere exposure effect. The more often you see something, the more often you like it. And companies will invest a lot in advertising just to expose you to their brand. Very, very interesting phenomenon. The von Restorff effect. Hannah, do you have a comment?
This might not be entirely related, but can the mere exposure effect also work on people? Like the more you see people you don't know and then you see them more often, you're more inclined to perhaps like them?
Yes, 10,000%. So if you take the same bus to school every day and you see the same people on the bus, whether you've talked to them ever in your life, they're your bus buddies, aren't they? Same cashier at the grocery store, that's your cashier buddy now. We have this huge connection between likability and exposure. And yeah, back in the day, like when it was like, you know, we didn't have the internet and stuff, and it's like, okay, well, here's the little town that you live in, and just like the person who's next door is the person you marry because that's who you saw all the time. Yeah. Okay. I think I'll do one more. The von Restorff effect. The von Restorff effect. Does anyone recall a yellow slide earlier? Do you see that yellow slide earlier that looked like this one? Yeah, what was with that? But you remember it, right? And that's the von Restorff effect. So because it was different than all the other slides, I didn't tell you anything about it, you remembered it. And that's just distinctness is memorable. So if we see a lot of the same and then all of a sudden we see something different, we're much more likely to remember that thing. Von Restorff. Okay, so I think that's good for today. I'm going to tell you about your homework assignment. There's a couple other ones in here. Fluency, we'll talk about next time. I don't think any of you will use that in your assignment too much, but maybe. Things are pretty, we like them. So you can look this up if you'd like. And here's a website I want to point out to you. It's a book, it's a website that's free. And you can just look up some of these laws and common cognitive biases on this site. So you can use this as one way of ideating around what your assignment's going to be. There's cute little cards and different heuristics and principles. Okay, so what's your homework assignment? So last time, homework 2, you built mockups in Figma. You are welcome to use those mockups for homework 3, especially if you're not very comfortable in Figma. I recommend that you go ahead and use the same experience if you can. And for this assignment, you're going to be redesigning that experience, making 2 improvements with any principles from psychology that were covered today or that are just well-documented, well-supported principles in psychology. Any Gestalt principle, any cognitive bias. So you might do proximity work. Everything needs proximity work. You might add some social proof, add some reviews or some likes, or 25 people bought this today, or whatever it is, right? So you could pull from anything. You're going to find 2 things you want to improve and design those changes. And then you're going to provide me the rationale. So you're going to demonstrate, like, this was the Gestalt principle of proximity. This is why it's better now. And I do want an academic reference for each of the 2 principles that you cite. A great way to find the original source, your favorite chatbot, AI assistant. These are things from like the 60s and 70s and earlier. So every chatbot friend you have should know about all of these effects, and then also what the original article was. So don't spend too much time falling down a rabbit hole trying to find your reference. Just grab the reference for that particular effect, or the Gestalt principles in general, or things like that. Just want you to have that connection to the academic literature. So I want to see a before and an after, and just look at the rubric and the assignment description pretty carefully. So focus on a single page, provide at least 2 improvements. You need 2 different principles as well. You can totally do multiple. So we were just talking about like proximity and similarity and continuity. Yep, you could make a change that is all 3 of those things. But I need to see 2 changes, and I need to see 2 references. So however you want to do that, great. And then I give you a little example here. This was not the psych principles that we discussed today, so don't take it verbatim here, but it's a good example of how to maybe format your document once it loads. Oop, wow, I don't know where I am now. Here's where I am. Okay. So I just wanted to give you a sense of like, I'd like to see an intro, tell me about what experience you're using and the assignment. Make it really clear what you're changing. So text boxes like this, throw in a couple references at the bottom, reference in the text. Teresa?
Yeah, I was wondering if we are just working on one of our flows and if you recommend adding more screens or just keeping how many we originally had.
I want you all to choose your own adventure. Some folks, this is brand new territory. I don't mind seeing 1 screen with 2 changes and 2 references.
Okay.
Some of you, though, want a stronger portfolio item and you are quicker in Figma. So in that case, do a workflow or do 2 screens or do 4 changes. But the minimum for the assignment, 2 and 2, it can be 1 screen, it can be 8 screens.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Thanks for your time.
Thank you.